All right, class. So today I'm working on a supplemental video for study skills. If you look over your slides in the content area for study skills, you should be fairly well equipped, but I wanted to support what would have been a lecture this evening by this video. Now, your instructor is not a video master. I feel way more comfortable talking in front of the class. However, there are times, try something new. So, a few different categories of study skills. Our last class meeting when we got together, I went ahead and talked about the 4 phases of reading. I just want to try to do a quick recap. So with reading, you really have 4 phases. Unfortunately, a lot of college students, a lot of high school students, they have 1 phase. Test is tomorrow, so I'm going to stay up late tonight reading all 5 chapters. Not smart. I'll be honest, I've done that. It's not really a good way to pass a course. The preferred 4 steps of 4 phases of reading go like this. Pre-reading, that means you look through your textbook, you pay particular attention to the highlighted or bold statements in the reading so that when you go to class, you'll kind of have some knowledge of what the instructor's talking about. Pre-readings probably take 5-10 minutes max, so that you walk into class, prepare for class lecture, you don't walk in cold, you already have some knowledge. So your intake of the information is a lot smoother. And then the second phase is actually the deep reading. And this is probably the time-consuming phase of reading. I suggest you break up your reading into segments of 20 to 30 minutes max. Usually, if you try to read for much longer than 30 minutes, your retention of the information goes down. Yeah, so try to limit these reading sessions into 20 to 30 minute brackets. Your third phase of reading would be, as far as the college textbook goes, would be summarizing. So you've pre-read, you've walked into the class, so you were prepared for what the instructor was going to say. You have some understanding. Now you've actually spent time reading the material. Now just go back and summarize. This is a time where you might want to go back and highlight materials or keep yourself maybe a small notepad and summarize many of the key items. Oftentimes there's research that says that the way that the human memory works is with memory webs. Where you take a main item, and let's say it's biology and you're talking about osmosis. You would break off into smaller subsections that really make up the entire osmosis process. Now, this summarizing part is probably the most important, but it only works if you were fully committed to phases 1 and 2. And then the night before the test, the night before the exam, your simple, most easiest phase of reading is review, number 4. And that should only take you 20 minutes. Again, unfortunately, people don't do that. People skip phase 1. They turn phase 2 into the night before, and they tend to not do so well. Studies show, research show, I can attest that this actually works. When I went from reading the whole textbook the night before the exam to the 4 phases method, my GPA went way up, and I noticed some successes in college. Writing. Now, writing requires a lot of thought and also requires a lot of time. It's probably one of the reasons why students, their commitment level to writing is possibly low. I understand that writing is one of those skills that if you didn't pick it up by now, it's not fun. It's not fun to go back and work on the fundamentals, but this is the right time. You're in the right location. At NFC, you have all of the support, small class sizes. Your instructors are generally very helpful. With writing, what you need to do, and I'm talking about writing, whether it's a paper or an essay assignment, when you start writing, focus on the verbs. Focus on the verbs, the action words. Before your assignment is due, you probably should start working on some type of freestyle writing. Play around with words. Just pull out a pad of paper and start jotting down information. Freestyle writing means just no rules, Again, focus on verbs and action words and on main concepts, because that will give you a direction for how you want to compose your writing with outlines, with essays, etc. And something else I find a lot of students fail to do, and that's ask your instructor for clarification. If you don't know, there's no felony in asking, hey, what are you looking for in this writing? It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of commitment. And one thing that you have at NFC that you may not be able to access as easily in other areas is we have an outstanding crew of tutors. And as you've probably heard Mr. Brock come to some of your classes and speak on this, not only do we have peer tutoring, but we have professional tutoring and also Smart Thinking, which is free online tutoring. So writing can be a big endeavor. Similar to reading, you have different phases. And I'm mostly talking about major writings, papers, really come in 5 phases. The first one is picking a topic. Typically, your instructor is going to say, hey, these are some guidelines in sociology and psychology. There's some very content-related material. But typically, they'll give you some list of possible options. It's a good idea for you to, if you're thinking of, considering a topic, bounce your idea off your instructor. That's what he or she is getting paid to do. Bounce it off of them. They're a resource. They're going to be the person grading it. Reach out to them. Pick a topic that is interesting to you. Because if you're going to have to commit to a 3 to 5 page paper, you want to have fun with it. You want to turn it into something that you're proud of and something that you enjoy. Phase 2, so the first phase was pick a topic. Phase 2 is probably the lengthiest phase, and that is your research. Earlier on in the semester, we got into databases and how to access those databases. Those are a great tool for you to use. Far beyond what I talked about in that lecture, you could also reach out to the very helpful staff in the Marshall Hamilton Library. They're always very helpful with accessing the databases. Some of our practices were looking at how to use EBSCOhost and how to research appropriate articles, peer-reviewed journals, hopefully within the right time frame. But your research is your probably your biggest commitment in terms of time expenditure. You have to commit a lot of time to it. And you have to be able to throw some stuff out. You may pick a topic that's, hey, how is this research going to relate to my topic? Does it show what I'm hoping to prove in my paper, what I'm hoping to present in my paper? You're going to have to throw some stuff out. You might even, as you start doing research, you may even find you have to modify your topic. You may even learn that you have to take your paper in a different direction than you were originally intending. You have to commit to the research phase. That's the biggest and most helpful part. The third phase is putting together a thesis. And in some cases, it could be an outline. So you've picked a topic, you've gotten bodies of information to work with. Now you start developing your statement. I am going to write about the impact of nature over nurture. I think it's all genetics. And then you have research to back that up. Now, after you've committed phase 3, then you have to start working on a draft. Now, the draft actually, if it's kind of like with reading, if you've committed to the first 3 phases, phase 4 is okay. Your draft is just that. It kind of goes in line with the freestyle writing at first. A lot of times the stress and anxiety about, oh my gosh, I got a paper, it's due in such and such weeks, I'm stressed, I'm going to procrastinate. You actually feel a ton better and you're far more productive when you start putting something on paper. Once you get something on paper, you've got a living document or some body of work, you feel a lot better, and you have something that you can go back to and modify and revise as you have thoughts. So the draft, you can have a couple of different drafts, but the main thing is that's your 4th phase, and you start putting that together, designing and organizing materials. And after you have a living draft and you've made rounds of modifications, it's a good time to take that draft to a tutor and have them evaluate it. Now, if you're going to go to a tutor, whether it's professional, whether it's peer, whether it's free, online, Smart Thinking, and they give you advice and insight, take it. Take that advice. And modify your paper in the fifth phase, which is your additions and your review. And if there were a sixth phase, it would be finalizing and submitting. But working on a research paper takes time. And I think where most people fall short is in the time commitment. Now with math, let's be honest, it may be where at some point in time you missed a history class, right? Or you missed American government. You were sick, you had something going, whatever was going on, you missed class. It's a good possibility, if you missed a class lecture, you could go to a peer, a friend, somebody in your class and say, hey, can I see your notes? And you could probably get some gist of what the instructor went over in that lecture. Then you could probably go back to the textbook and the slides. You could say, oh, okay, so I kind of get it. It's not that detrimental that you missed class. Now, if you ever ask a peer to do that with math work, it's kind of useless because what they show you is a finished math problem and they didn't show you the steps, because really the steps is how you do it. So missing a math class is not recommended. If you find yourself doing that, you really need to possibly try to get with the instructor if possible during his or her office hours and go to a tutor. There are some resources out there, Khan Academy and others, that can show you how to work certain types of problems. But for math, the only way to improve is to do it. I guess you could say the same thing about writing. The more you do it, the more you improve. Practice makes improvement. But with math, it's logical, it's analytical, but it's also quite time consuming. Where I find students tend to struggle is initially, right off the bat, is in their confidence level with math, and then the commitment, the time commitment. Most of college success really does pertain to time management. Testing skills. Funny story. Testing is one of those things like riding a bicycle or maybe even writing papers. The more you do it, the better you get at it. In college, you will probably find that most of your tests, most of your exams are probably multiple choice. Multiple choice is a good assessment skill because it's probably one of the most convenient and most practical ways to assess transfer knowledge. But you have to be careful with multiple choice tests. A lot of times with multiple choice tests, you have 4 possible answers, 4 possible options. What I typically recommend is go with what you know. So when you're opening up the test, you go through it, go ahead and answer the ones you know, the ones that you're familiar with. There are cases in which you've studied and you've done everything right. Pre-reading, all 4 phases of reading. You studied, you committed the time to it, and something gets you stumped. One of the questions really knocks you out of whack a little bit. Skip that, I'm going to come back to it. If you're taking a test on a Scantron or a bubble sheet, be careful skipping it. Because sometimes what I notice people do is they skip, all right, I'm going to skip 17 and come back to it. But when they answer 18, they actually answer 17 and they figure it out on like number 23, tick, 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 so they get confused. And what ends up happening is people run out of time, they have to backtrack. So I would suggest if you're going to skip one, in some cases, it's probably best to go ahead and bubble something in and plan on coming back to it. Now, some strategies for multiple choice tests, obviously, go through answering what you know first. When you come to an answer, you come back to one that you're going to work on that you're a little confused on. Think about this. In higher education, we tend to not use absolute words like always or never. Usually in higher education, we tend to use words like often or seldom. So be mindful of that. If you're looking at all 4 answer options, one may be particularly longer than the other or particularly shorter than the other. In the military, we had a process we call long, short, Charlie. If all of the 4 possibilities look similar and you're stumped, maybe look at one of them as a lot longer than the others, or one of them is significantly shorter than the others. Or a main component of long, short, Charlie strategy is if you're completely lost and you know nothing, there's no chance, go with C. It's at least a strategy. Some exams you get into, they're timed tests, and your instructor or an administrator of the test will say, you have 3 minutes remaining. When you hear that, a lot of times it triggers like, oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of time, stress. And what people tend to do is they start Christmas treeing, A, C, B. Typically, if you do that, by law of probability, you're possibly skipping around all the right answers. It's probably better to pick a column and bubble in a column. Studies show C is probably your safest option. All of that being said, there is absolutely 100% no replacement, no substitution for the hard work. If you're not putting in the work, if you're not studying, you're going to have problems. However, the strategies that you're going to see in the content area for study skills are going to show you best practices for when you are prepared and you're going into reading assignments, writing assignments, quantitative assignments, or testing materials. Hope to see you guys soon in person. If not, stay safe, stay healthy.